Yes, welcome everyone. Glad to have you here. And we have two incredible experts with us today to do a deep dive into a topic that I think is very relevant to today's environment. Now, I want to frame this a little bit within the conscious capitalist future of the conscious enterprise as a starting point. Now, one of the things that we believe is that in a time of radical uncertainty and supply chain, logistics, being one of those areas, how do we manage? What does that mean? And what does it mean particularly for why conscious businesses are more important than ever? Now, our hypothesis here is that organizations that create high degrees of trust, deep worker engagement, and have higher levels of psychological safety are going to be more agile, innovative, and resilient. Why? Because as organizations need to pivot in these times of uncertainty, picture the alternative, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. How much risk are people going to take? How much innovation are you going to get from that? We know that the studies definitely show companies that have high degrees of trust and psychological safety do much better around innovation and resilience. So the question becomes, in that context, let's take a deep dive on a specific aspect of uncertainty right now, which is the supply chain and where that may or may not be going over the next 6, 12, 24 months. We couldn't have two better people to talk about it. Nada from I'm an expert in supply chains and in AI, and Enrique, who's every day out there rolling up his sleeves and trying to deal with this for his clients. So thank you both. And Nada, maybe you can start by framing it for us a little bit around supply chain disruption now and in the next 12 months. What's going on?
Thank you. First, Timothy, thank you for having me. I'm really thrilled to be here with you, Enrique, obviously Michael too. And this is an incredibly important issue, an incredibly important time because it is so tumultuous. Um, if we just kind of look back, so many companies failed during COVID, went out of business. Those that came out of COVID, so many that I know that I'm aware of, um, we're struggling with the P&L, with profitability, trying to get their cash flow back. And I say that because even though for so many people COVID it seems like it's decades ago, for many businesses, many of them have not fully bounced back. So here we are now in 2025, the beginning of 2025, and we are in a period that is fraught with certain uncertainty. That's the only way how to describe it.
I love that. Certain uncertainty. It's even better than radical uncertainty.
I'm
Let's
not
have
sure.
certain uncertainty.
Well, because if you ask me what do you know for a fact? I know for a fact that it's uncertain. And, as a supply chain and forecasting is my area of expertise, I can't even, I'm being asked to comment or discuss. I can't even get a straight answer simply because the tariffs keep changing, the negotiations keep changing. When you run a business, how are you supposed to, manage your supply chain when nothing is fixed? Um, and so that has created this incredible sense of uncertainty that I think Enrique and I actually chatted right before we went live, very similar, reminiscent of the mid 2020 when we were in COVID, and what we saw is uncertainty. And so what companies were doing is hoarding. um, we were just seeing a lot of buying going on that could create a lot of misleading, right, in terms of indicators, in terms of what that throughput is, what the purchasing is, and all of it. But I think we have two major collisions. One is the tariffs, one is AI. And these appear to be, sort of separate worlds. And I've kind of followed and tracked both of those. So on the one hand, I see business executives very much in, okay, we went from just in time, JIT, to, well, should we 2023, 2024, go to just in case and start stocking up inventories and reshuffle our supply chains. And now we're in 2025 where, oh my gosh, um, we're in tariff scenario. I was talking to somebody in the an SVP in the auto industry, November. So we knew the new administration was going to come in. And I remember him saying to me, we're not worried about it at all. Why are we not worried? Because of de minimis. We know how to do this. We know how to do the packaging. We know how to circumvent. We're going to go to Vietnam. We don't have to go direct from China. We're good. Well, we know what has happened, as I mentioned, certain uncertainty. And then at the same time, what you have is this hype over AI and technological capability and in terms of what it can do. And all of that creates uncertainty, it costs money. So what do I think, kind of answering your question? I think the companies that I know are doing, there's a lot of hoarding. There is a lot of reshuffling of the supply chain, trying to diversify, which I think certainly makes sense, right? Moving out of the currently high tariff regions, which is China. The other thing is renegotiating terms with existing suppliers. This, I think, really very much touches on the conscious capitalism and the kind of things that I saw post-COVID, because post-COVID, when I talked to businesses, they said that it was really connecting with the human element and care of suppliers and customers that got them through. I think that is something to really think about now, especially in the age of AI, in that human connection that cannot be replicated. Um, we're seeing things like chaos, but looking at optimizing bundles in order to reduce fuel. A lot of chaos across the board. And I saw today, uh, as if things were not uncertain enough, obviously we have the situation, Israel and Iran, energy prices, oil prices going up, that is further going to exacerbate costs. So we are looking at a really uncertain situation, and I have thoughts on what to do, but I'll stop because I could talk for a long time.
Nada, thank you for bringing that into context for us. Is it mid 2020s on steroids? What you're observing is a lot of hoarding and buying, and at least the initial wave of thinking is, do I need to diversify? How fast can I diversify my supply chain? And how do I renegotiate with suppliers? At least those are the beginnings of some thoughts.
Exactly.
And the other thing I take away from what you just said, and I love the just in time to just in case to just who knows, might be the next line, because there's clearly some short-term adjustments just to deal with the immediate financial situation. But then there's a longer-term adjustment. Is this going to be a systemic change in how we think about supply chains? So I want to come back to that in a moment. Enrique, over to you in terms of short term. What are you seeing? How is that affecting your business? And when you look at it from the stakeholder orientation point of view, um, what are you doing that's coming up that's different from what you see some of your competitors doing in the short
Well,
term?
Timothy, thank you very much, first and foremost, for having me here. It's a pleasure, always fun and enjoyable to share this panel with Nada, such an expert when it comes to supply chains and forecasting, and of course, with Michael. So thank you once again for having me here. What I see in the short term, and I think you mentioned it, and Nada allude to it as well, and something that's very different from COVID, the challenges are there. So we're going through a phase in time where businesses and business owners and leaders around the world are questioning a lot of things. AI, of course, is helping and could help, but the one difference that I see is the level of trust. And you mentioned it, and that is a very significant difference for me and for our clients and for the way that we run our businesses, because we can plan and adjust and adapt for many different situations. I think COVID has taught us to be nimble, has taught us to be proactive, has taught us to be agile. And we've been doing that for our clients every day. Now, when it comes to something like this, on top of all of that, you just don't have a clear understanding of what the outcome will be. For example, tariff war with China, right? So the tariffs went from 145% to what they are right now, which is somewhere around 30 to 55. And there's tons of different questions around this. One is it the 90-day period? What's going to happen after 90 days? 90 days is not enough time to either bring all the products that you need for the rest of the day. It's not enough time to actually nearshore. It's not enough time to vet other suppliers around the world and try to get samples on time to then start buying to someone else. And then the other thing is, even that 30% is not accurate because there's, and you probably, and the audience have heard that there's this tariff stacking hikes. And so, because it's what the administration said today, plus what it has been said in the past. So it's not just like the new number that you would read on the highlights or on the news. It's just more complicated than that, depending on the products. So that's one thing. And I think trust is in the short term something that we will struggle to get back anytime soon. And it's basically making business owners either panic or wait. And at the end of the day, maybe none of those are the right strategic solutions for the conditions that their personal businesses and industries demand. So it's a little bit of a lack of clarity in general.
So I wonder if there's a difference, Enrique, that you're noticing between what we might call small, medium enterprises, small, medium-sized enterprises, and the larger companies, because most of our audience is small, medium-sized enterprises, and I'm curious, they don't have, warehouses
Yep.
where they can stack all of this stuff, and
Right.
the hoarding is a different thing. What are you observing there that you're noticing for that group in particular?
Well, I think that group's more vulnerable in general. We cater to both. So we work a lot with mid-sized companies. We also work with a lot of big automotive companies that are multi-billion-dollar companies. And the one thing you see in one end, which is the higher, bigger, stronger companies, more well-established, is they, of course, they can wait. They can pay higher rates. They can make more mistakes. They can try to increase their inventory levels, even though that's going to cost them more, and even though that's going to come and basically hit us all with some inflation, right? And then you have the mid-sized to smaller size companies that don't have the amount of cash flow that's needed to just simply wait or just wait it out. And there's a lot of companies out there struggling because their livelihood and maybe their whole company depends on whether do they ship now and try to rush it into the US before the 90-day period ends, or do we send it somewhere else, which is something that we've been doing for our clients using Canada and Mexico as potential target countries. So we would import into those countries under an in-bond process, and you won't have to pay taxes until you import them from those countries into the US at whatever tax level that would be. But again, it's not sure. So you're somewhat gambling a little bit the future of your company. And the smaller you are, of course, the higher the risk is, and the more people are stressed, and rightfully so.
So when you put it in that way, Enrique, now that I look over to you and I sort of say, okay, short term, how do I start to deal with this? I mean, there's a limited number of options, right? I can do some scenario planning, and there's a limited number of options. How do you frame this for CEOs of mid-sized firms?
So just to underscore what Enrique had said, I'm especially concerned about small and medium-sized companies. They are the ones that I think are suffering the most, have the greatest risk. Many of them barely got through COVID, and I think that for most of us, we rely on them as well. We need diversity in our choices in where we shop, what we buy, suppliers, all of it. I also want to underscore that what Enrique said, that 90 days is just way too short to really be able to do anything. For small to medium-sized companies, what I have recommended is, well, one, you had mentioned scenario planning already. I think it is absolutely critical to take that tool out of the toolbox, try to look at different possible scenarios, because I think a little while ago you had said, well, what will this look like? And I don't think anybody knows, because, as Enrique said, this is like the stacking of the tariffs. We don't know, and it keeps shifting. So what do? You need good scenario planning in order to readjust your supply chain. One of the things that I think no one should forget is, we all know it, the 80-20 Pareto's law. Not all inventory, not all customers are created equal. You've got to really be able to look at your portfolio of products, customers, inventory items, and you actually have to, at this point, pare down and go after the high yield, high return items, and be able to pare down the portfolio. Because the goal now is to keep profitable, to stay in business, to keep riding this out, that I do think is not going to be permanent. So that is in my mind, the short term. And, you can, as companies, you can use a lot of AI technologies that are not that expensive. It's funny, we had a talk with Spencer Funk, who is the CEO of Lee and Funk, and he happened to mention that at Lee and Funk, they were still using the free version of ChatGPT, which I thought was really interesting, because here you've got this large enterprise. And he goes, we're getting all this mileage out of it. So why go to pay for something when we could squeeze stuff out of the free version? So I think tools like this can assist, can help in terms of, again, focus, paring down, and only doing the vital few, as sometimes that we call it. But I think that is absolutely essential at this point.
Well, I love that. Adjusting your portfolio according to the
Absolutely.
2080
Right.
rule to the extent that that exists, and then prioritizing across that,
You
I think
have to do that.
is a really, really helpful thing. What I'm curious about specifically is the application of AI in helping you do that. Is that something that, I mean, versus the old spreadsheet, like we
Absolutely.
have 100
Yeah.
SKUs, where does the
Absolutely. I mean, AI is a tool, and it can definitely do the quantitative aspects and the analysis to work with you. The question becomes, you have to know what to query it. So I use it all the time, but I've noticed in my use with it, you know, I have a lot of expertise in my area, but if I was starting in my early part of my career, I wouldn't. So this goes back to trust and humans and people that have knowledge. One of the mistakes I've seen companies is, do not get rid of people, do not lay off people that have this domain knowledge, because they know what to ask. Because if you don't know what to ask, you're not going to get the right questions. But I think working in tandem, AI can help you in enormous ways that you cannot do yourself. But remember,
yeah.
it's only backward looking. It can look at relationships, it can look at historical data, but it's not going to know that moments ago tariff situation had changed. And you couple that with the trust element of working with your suppliers, that maybe together you decide how you're going to share a lot of these costs, what's going to be passed down to the final customer, and you don't do this alone. So I think those are the kinds of things where AI is just, your partner in all of this, but
Okay.
that's it.
I want to come back to the AI question in a moment. Enrique, I want to go over to you and sort of
Right.
say, 2 or 3 practical things that you think you're advising your clients to think about.
Absolutely. So, and the first one is really just knowing your capabilities. I feel like this challenging times, and especially now, will be very important for owners and mid-sized companies to really understand what they're capable of. Right. You have to understand where your costs are. You have to understand exactly who your most profitable clients are. And hopefully, because this is something that you can't build right now that you're actually needed, but hopefully, to your point earlier, Timothy, through conscious capitalism mentality and through stakeholder value, you have created long-term relationships with people, not only on the supplier side, but also on the client side, that understand this, that understand you and know what you can bring to the table. And then they will, at the end of the day, trust you and be with you to come up with a joint solution for whatever they're struggling. So first, get to know your capabilities better. Once you understand your capabilities, just really try to rely on those. Cost is also going to be important, and this is something that everyone should be taking very seriously. The landed cost of products are just going to be higher. There's no other way around it, right? No matter what you do, and there's a bunch of things that you can do to minimize it, but it will be higher than what it was before. So knowing that your costs are going to be higher, then once again might become a pricing question, and then maybe either pass part or pass some of it or pass to some customers but not others. That's also very important. And I think the last thing is try to hedge your options instead of just simply putting all the eggs in one basket, as you would more casually say. Just try to play a combination of things. Like maybe one container you'll have to pay the higher tariff because you can continue meeting those orders that you have from your clients, but then show it to your clients. I mean, you have to communicate, and I think that could be maybe a number 4, right? So know your company and your capabilities. Make sure that your cost and profits, good pricing, you have a good pricing strategy. Try to openly talk with your suppliers, and then do 2-3 things in parallel to see which one will work better. You don't have to commit to one in particular. So you could ship one container, maybe pay a little extra on that, maybe store some at an in-bonded facility so you can wait and hold for the tariffs and those 90 days, and then maybe you can get a better tariff exposure. And then I would just say in general, ask COVID basically helped the world understand the importance of supply chains and supply chain professionals. I think what we're seeing now is the importance of customs brokerage. If you don't have a good customs broker, I think now is the time. We at our company are using AI a lot to help us with the customs brokerage side of things, not only with some strategies, but then also reclassifying products or using certain rules and regulations that are in place that some people might not know about, that could help you with your particular product and can help you waive some of the tariffs, if not all of them.
So I really appreciate that, nuts and bolts kind of view, Enrique. And somebody, Larry, has raised in the question, he says, and we haven't even talked about currency fluctuations, right? I mean, in case we haven't noticed, the dollar has shrunk in value along the way as well. And I'm curious, Enrique, how is that playing out in terms of, again, landed cost of goods? Everything just went up 10-15%, regardless of the tariffs.
Right. No, I mean, in general, the market's it's dollars at the end of the day. So those things will end up impacting your negotiations directly with the suppliers, but everyone's really charging. Most of the companies that we work with actually charge in dollars, pay in dollars, invoice in dollars. So that is definitely an impact, and you have to consider it. But I would say medium-sized, smaller companies, you have 10 to 15 things that are actually you have to worry about. That could probably be maybe your number 11, right? That will not be the number 10 or 5 or 3. So yeah, that's what I would say to Larry. And then the other thing is oil and the geopolitical tensions in other countries that you mentioned as well, and Nada mentions it as well. So that also is going to come and play into this whole scenario. What's going to happen with Israel, Iran? Is it really fuel is going to continue to go up? And we don't know, but that could really play a big, important role. We see that some airlines already increased their fuel because, of course, jet fuel is more expensive, and everything else will come back to higher costs, higher landed costs for all products that are not manufactured in the U.S.
And so, Nada, I want to come back to you and sort of look big picture and sort of say, all right, now looking out, I mean, long term, 12 months, 12 to 24 months. Let's be really long term, go to 24 months.
Right.
What are the implications over the next year for a mid-sized company of trying to restructure or reorganize their supply chain? Because, of course, we've been talking about what do you do now? When the containers are in the ships on the way or on the dock over there waiting to come here. But now let's look forward 12, 24 months. And at the same time, we have to be thinking about, when we survive, how do we restructure the supply chain to make it more resilient, whatever that means. And so I'm curious,
Right.
I mean, how do you even frame what a
Yeah.
resilient supply chain looks like over the next 12 to 24 months?
So a few thoughts. You had mentioned, and we're sort of chuckling here, but 12 to 24 months seems like an eternity in order to be able to plan. Enrique had mentioned in terms of knowing your capabilities, and I would go back and add to that, first of all, knowing your core competency as a business, because this is where you've got to pare down. And it may be one of these things where you have to not just focus, but perhaps pivot in terms of what that business is, given the new marketplace and given the costs in terms of sourcing, in terms of supply, you may have to slightly pivot in terms of what you're offering. So there's a real analysis that has to take place in terms of what's the core competency. Then there is the issue of cost, and it sounds like it would be pretty obvious, but I think a lot of companies, we have so many hidden costs, right, that take place. And I had already alluded to the fact that I think many companies make the mistake of laying off senior talent that costs more. But in my experience, the senior people really understand their domain, their area of expertise, that someone's coming in, they could code 100 ways to Sunday with R and Python and all of it, but they don't know how to build relationships. They don't have a history of relationships, and this is what is needed because it goes back to that trust. So when I look at 12 to 24 months, we've got to survive. And because it is so uncertain, you and I and Enrique, we've been talking about 6 months, seems like it's a long time period. 90 days. How do we get through the 90 days? We don't even know what the next 12 to 24 months is. But the answer is going to be continuing, again, paring down, knowing the business you're in, and really focusing on cash flow. Because one thing that we know, if we're going to stay in business, we've got to keep the cash flow going. How do we do that? We prioritize, know our costs, know the costs, and they're often misunderstood, as I had already mentioned. And this is also where AI can help a lot. Like one of the things I'm seeing is companies are, for example, trying to optimize. I already mentioned packaging and their various bundling in order to lower, say, shipping and fulfillment costs. This bundling, a lot of times, you as a human or in spreadsheet, a lot of times AI can do it much better, or at least, you can toggle back and forth with it, knowing what to ask it and how to work with it, because we want to keep our costs as low as profit as possible. And the other thing, we want to keep our customer base. We had already mentioned the issue of hoarding. Most companies that I know saw what happened when they ran out of stock during COVID. That is a real fear with companies, to run out of stock. So we see hoarding, but I would also say keep the profitability, look at substitute products, look at other sources of supply. And again, AI can help with this. And this is where you couple that with people that have been in the business for a long time, and they know and they have relationships, and they could say, well, yeah, this is what's going on, but I know Timothy, my source, and he and I have already made a arrangement, and that is one of the things that is going to get you through it. So to me, we want to stay in business for the next 12 to 24 months because it is so uncertain.
So I love that notion of the relationships. This goes back to
Absolutely.
Enrique's point about, you've invested in those, and
Right.
Enrique, and your organization, by taking a stakeholder approach, you're in a different position from those that have been very transactionally oriented. And that's suddenly a competitive advantage. So say a little bit more about, more broadly, how you've done that in terms of, being stakeholder oriented.
Right.
Why and how do you optimize that now?
Well, I'll start by saying that for companies that actually have done their homework and for companies that are a little bit more stakeholder oriented and have done a good job, I would argue that this time and times where people and companies and industries are challenging, like the ones that we're facing right now, are not only times where you should probably sit and think, how can I just survive? I think these are great opportunities. People should be aggressive. People should be actually thinking and maybe playing a little more offensive and maybe capitalizing on some of the capabilities that they have and the competitive advantages that they have generated over time and over years just by having a better culture, better team, better strategies, better suppliers, better customers. So, how to kind of now capitalize on this? It's really all about communication, right? Openly communicate to people, openly communicate to your trusted partners, both on the sourcing side of things, also on your client side of things, right? Because you have a very big component when it comes to the cash flow. And the cash, of course, has to do with very strategic cost planning. So use the worst case scenario. So budget realistically, and by realistically, given the times that we're facing are just higher than what you normally would expect because things will continue to change, and change usually is reflected as higher cost. And then on the pricing side, talk to your clients, make sure that they understand that some of these changes have to be passed on to them. There's no way no one can actually eat all this cost because, of course, margins are a lot thinner than what these expenses are, this increases have been. And then talk to your team. I think that's also very important. I think now is the time to trust your company. Again, if we're talking about a company that has done their homework in the past and they're stakeholder oriented, now's the time where you rely on your team and their expertise and their commitment to your company and to the purpose, and you let them run and let them free, and of course have conversation with them. But that's kind of what we are doing at Vector, and it has helped. It helped a lot during the pandemic, and it's helping now, and we're adding a lot of value to customers that have been with us for many years, and we'll try to continue doing that for them. Expediting some shipments, I think it's important, but then also sourcing, right? Longer term, you mentioned 6 to 12 months from now, Timothy, and I think it is important for everyone to realize that having just one single supplier is not efficient, right? It's not efficient for the times that we're living, and so look into other countries, look into other economies, look into replacement products, like Nada was saying, look into maybe different designs as well that could help you. Better, smarter designs can also help you reduce overall cost, not only on the packaging that Nada also mentioned, but on the products itself. And then work with companies and countries that are willing to partner with you for the long term and start making those relationships, because it takes years and years to build a good relationship with someone. But now's the time to not be close, but open quickly and start forging those alliances that are going to help you be more competitive 2 or 3 years from now.
Enrique, I love that approach. In a sense, pull the teams together. You're a team in this with your
And go for it,
suppliers,
right?
with your customers, with your own team. You've got to look across that value chain and say, we're in this together. And if we are in this together, how can we work together to optimize an unpredictable
And
situation?
this is an opportunity, right? Because we talk a little bit more on the negative side of what this whole thing is bringing to the industry. But if you're one of those companies, this is an opportunity to grow. This is an opportunity to invest. This is an opportunity to really make a lot more money than you and your competitors can do, because you have a much better supply chain and you have smarter people and you have a better culture. So
Yeah,
I
and
would
Love
take
that.
this as an opportunity to be offensive.
yeah, and if
Nada,
I
you
can
jump
add
in.
to that, yeah, no, it's When we talk about the team, talking to the team, really important, I think, to make sure that your people are secure, they're confident. We see so many layoffs going on. We see what's happening, and I think there's an anxiety. And I think it's really important to have trust across the supply chain, but trust also internally with the team to have, information flow, transparency. And then, as far as one of the things Enrique mentioned is redesigning the products. So not only can we look at substitutes for the products that we have, but product redesign is essential. And this is where I think add suppliers into the teams, add suppliers to work with you to redesign the products. For maybe there's a way to redesign the product itself in order to be able to utilize um, components, materials that are less expensive, that are easily sourced, that have shorter lead times. This, I think, is an important place to bring in suppliers and have that co-creation, if you will, within that team environment that includes the few members of the
Yeah.
supply
Yeah.
chain and not alone.
So what I really love about this, and it's interesting. I'm in Silicon Valley. I've had a couple meetings the other day. Last night we had a nice dinner with a bunch of people, but the VC mindset of short term, it's all about the
Right.
money, follow the money. Um, and people are constantly asking, make the business case, make the business case. Well, it's fascinating because in a sense, you've just made a business case, right? It's just sort of said, if
Absolutely.
you have this level of trust across your supply chain, now is the time to go in some ways, be aggressive versus your competitors who are
Right.
struggling basically to keep the boat afloat. You are too, but you have an opportunity within this. And, it's like fascinating. Like, how do you price that? I mean, like, how do you describe the business case for the fact that in this time of certain uncertainty, you're a little more agile, innovative, and resilient as a result of this.
Right.
And how would you describe that? I mean, Enrique, make the business case for me
Well,
because I mean it's
it's,
here in front of us, but
it's,
I'm just thinking, we're going to ask Nada to do a business case on this and do the analysis to show us that the research says it is better. But
well, you and I have talked about this extensively, right? In person and over beers and dinners. And I'm going to say
Wait, I didn't
2025.
get invited, Enrique. How did that happen?
I,
next time.
that next time for sure. You should always be
Just kidding.
invited. But
Just teasing.
no, 2025, for me, there's still a lot of people out there that are trying to make the business case. And you know what? Good for them. It's too long. It's too late. If you're still trying to make the business case to sell you this way of working, you're too late. So I don't know if I should even answer the question, or I will just simply say, you know what? Good for you
If you
guys.
don't get
Don't
it, you
worry
don't
about
get
it.
it. It's
Don't
as
worry
simple
about
as
it, because
that.
this has been going on for 10 years or more, right? So trying
Yeah.
to put a business case together to convince more financially driven, shorter term mindsets at this point is probably more of a hassle than just simply ignoring those people with those very outdated mindsets and moving on.
Yeah.
Now I can give you an answer, but if you have better people, if you have a better culture, if you stand for something, if you're clear about why you're doing the things you're doing, you can hire better quality people. That should be the only business case anyone needs. But I'll keep expanding, right? Because the numbers are there to support it. Now, you can keep looking at the numbers until you basically just go under and get bankrupt, or just simply change and make the first step, then make the second step, make the third one. But sometimes you just have to make the first step and go from there. But with better people, you can have better solutions to problems like this. With better solutions, you can actually acquire better customers that are more in line with what you think and what you do. And then when things come like this, they will understand that this is not a you problem. This is something that the world's facing, and you should not be eating all those costs by yourself, because they are not thinking about this quarter. They're thinking about the 10 years of relationship that they want to have with you, and they're okay sharing the cost. You're not struggling to pass this cost, which at the end of the day is what most companies will have to do when the landed cost of products is higher, they're going to pass it to the consumers. One way or another, call it whatever you want, you're going to pass those costs to the end consumer. So it's better to have consumers that understand why they're doing it and then just take it gladly and focus on solving the issue as opposed to complaining all the time. And then at the end of the day, you'll get with better customers, you'll get better suppliers because your suppliers are going to want to work with customers that are there for them in the future, that are paying on time, that I professionally run companies that are really caring for the environment, that are caring for the planet, for diversity, for gender equality. That's all critically important. And I'm just baffled by people trying to continuously ask me about the business case because it's a very, very easy, very quantifiable too. If you have a good culture and if you care about the stakeholders, you will make more money. The return on the investment is way higher. When was the book Terms of Endearment came out? It was 15 years.
2007, and then the 2017 version, and they outperformed 8-1, and it's like, well,
it's
okay,
just a
what do you
matter
need to
of
know?
are you paying attention or not paying attention? Right?
Yeah. So I love that, and not this plays off of your point of you need that experience. You need your people engaged now. You can't have them being in a place of fear, because if they're in a place of fear, they're not going to be creative, innovative. They're not going to be resilient and in the face of the challenges that we're facing.
And if we look at what's happening now, if we look at COVID, we look at any major event that has happened, it was the people and the creativity that gets us through it. And a company needs people that are committed, that are part of the team. And really, there is no, it's almost silly at this point. I posted something on LinkedIn and then somebody responded, this was just the other day, and I said, why is this such a hard message to get through to leaders? Why do we keep talking about this? There is study after study after study that has tracked companies over time, and companies that are leading in areas like conscious capitalism, that care about their talent and people, are more profitable. And this is something that investors need to understand. It also, their boards need to understand, because board members typically stay much, much longer in their place as opposed to CEOs, executives, and all of that. But we look at so many companies, and it's staggering to me, especially in this time where we look at AI and we look at all this, and I see companies going, oh no, we'll hire the young talent that can code. And it's like, no, you need relationships, you need commitment, and you need to build that with your supply chain team members. And look at so many companies. I mean, obviously, we talk about, Whole Foods, and we talk about Starbucks, and we talk about, companies that we know that have led in conscious capitalism. But I look at companies that we don't normally think of in the conscious capitalism space that have been consistently in the best places to work, like SAS, the SAS Institute. And it is quiet in Cary, North Carolina. I've had the pleasure to speak there a few times. It's unbelievable to me. I mean, they're in obviously software technology space. Their turnover rate is less than 4% in an industry that has a turnover rate around 20%. They can't, and they pay less on the average than what is the standard for the market. But why? They treat their people well. They have a wonderful work environment. And there's story after story. Why are we surprised? Why don't we understand this? This is something that I don't understand.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I want to pivot slightly on this, which is it's been implicit in what we've been talking about, but underneath this lies the need to reevaluate your business model. You've got to rethink your business model right now, real time, and then you've got to continually adjust your business model over the next 12 to 24 months. Now, what we've said, if you're surrounded by trust, you're surrounded by good people, you're surrounded by people who want to be innovative, creative, and resilient around approaching this, then you're going to do a better job of it. But fundamentally, this is also about really redesigning your business model. And I'm thinking now, Nada, when you go into a discussions and sort of say, hey, is the supply chain is now going to have a profound effect on your business model?
If
And
I may, yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I
no,
actually had a comment that on what we were previous. I just thought of it. I'm taking notes, guys, so I don't forget. There's just too much to say in 1 hour. So one of the companies, a small company that I had interviewed, I interviewed a CEO from my last book. It's a candle company in New Hampshire now. Yes, they do supply for Bath and Body Works, and they do the whole assortment of candles. But what they have done over the last few years, and the CEO told me this is the key to their success. They actually brought in weekly training on interpersonal skills. And he was telling me that it's how do we communicate? How do you and I or team members, how do we communicate that we can control our emotions, we can respect each other? Actual training in this space. And this training wasn't just for leadership, it was down to every level, the production line, the cleaning staff, everybody. And the numbers, I don't have them in front of me, but their profitability over the last 5 years has been just through the roof. And he said to me multiple times, this is our secret sauce, caring and training the people and the talent that we have. Now, you had asked me about the supply chain, and it is definitely
in the context of the business model now shifting in terms of
correct. It goes back to, I think, it really goes back to your core competencies and what the business is. Um, uh, I'm going to quote Spencer Fung again because I love this example. He had said to me, what companies need to do is reevaluate their business model. They cannot just digitize, they cannot just apply AI and digital technologies automatically to the old business model. And he said, it's kind of like um, a company who wants to digitize a horse and buggy while the competition is coming out with a car, essentially. You know, you've got to rethink what you have. Um, I hate to give the example in the fast fashion of Shein, given kind of what's going on with tariffs in China. But Shein is a good example of a company that has completely rethought the whole fast fashion model the way it was with Zara and H&M and then Forever 21 didn't work out. But, rather than following the protocols, it essentially created this algorithmic model that was very different in terms of the way the business model worked, in terms of the way the orders are placed, the way the purchasing process takes, the way the shipping, all of it. The business model was rethought. And it went to what are we doing? Who are we? And how do we meet our customer needs? And I think that has to be rethought in terms of not just making, as we say, resilient and more agile supply chain, but parts of that are obviously going to be definitely a shorter supply chain. I mean, before COVID, uh, supply chains had become so long that so many companies, really couldn't see beyond tier one. And oftentimes you ended up having problems and shortages in tier four, tier five that you couldn't see up the chain. So I would say definitely, making that supply chain more agile, but shorter, talking with suppliers, and then of course making, giving yourself definitely many different sources of supply to choose from and creating and essentially a portfolio like you would a financial portfolio.
I love that. I mean, first of all, let me make a quick comment. I'd love people that are on to please put your questions in the chat because I want to turn and answer some of those questions. Um, but as you say that, this fundamental rethinking of your business model is going to be an ongoing process because today we're dealing with tariffs. Who knows what the dollar is going to be doing over the next 3 to 4 years? Who knows what the impact of robotics is going to be, etc. So, with that said, one of the questions that's come up is, are there some areas of supply chain or some characteristics of the supply chain that make it easier to reshore than others? Nada, I'll start with you and then ask
Sure.
you, Enrique, to give your thoughts on
Yeah,
that.
it's certainly, and it's where we have the infrastructure, where we have not just talent, but the physical infrastructure. So, issues, people have asked me, when the whole tariff thing, well, can we make iPhones in the US? And I remember
Mm.
saying, I don't even want to talk about this. That is, I'm sorry, but it's kind of stupid. I mean, you need an infrastructure. And it takes years, it could take a decade to actually create the infrastructure. So we look at certain industries where we have the infrastructure and others where we simply don't, especially those that are technologically complex, and not understanding the complexity of the supply chain is just, really, really staggering. I remember when, do you remember when we had the issue? It was like we were still in COVID, I think, or post-COVID, with the baby formula, where there was a contamination in a site, and there was the issue. Well, why? Let's just start producing baby formula anywhere. And it's like, hello, I mean, there are standards that you have to adhere to, the different kinds of baby formula. Some are used in NICUs and hospitals. You can't just, go to your local garage and open up, I'll just make some baby formula. There's a level of ignorance here. So I think that we have to really look at what industry are we in and what is the infrastructure required in order to be able to do this? And what is it going to take to have the capability? How many years are we talking about? And what is the cost going to be before we can answer that?
We can do that. Well, we're running out of time, so one of the things I would love to do is, um, final thoughts. Enrique, advising a mid-market CEO, two things they should be thinking about. Nada, I'm going to come back and ask you the same thing. Enrique, final advice for the CEOs.
Well, I would say one of those has to be with your sourcing capabilities. Now is a good time to start opening new connections, new relationships around the world. So think about 5, 10 years from now, what other countries in the world could be good sourcing partners, and then develop those relationships. Now, I wouldn't advise them to forget about the relationships they already have with China, because the good thing with relationships is you can always add more. You don't have to forget about this one to have another one. And I think you can actually be more efficient and more successful. You have more than one. And again, I wouldn't forget China. I feel like a lot of companies are now going to get out of China. And then, of course, 5 years from now, everyone's going to try to come back to China. Just build a new one. So, sourcing, I think that could be one for CEOs. The other one is,
Enrique, just on that point, because the
yeah.
Chinese companies are not sitting on their hands. They're
Oh, they're
looking at
not. No,
Vietnam. They're looking at Malaysia. They're looking at Indonesia. They're looking at how do they diversify, because
absolutely.
they can read the same. They're looking at the same picture that you are. So this is
Absolutely.
where that communication of we're in this together, and if we've got to find a way around, do we onshore to Mexico together? Like what do we do?
And they are, right? To your point. I mean, they just recently, well, a year or two ago, opened a big port in Peru, Chancay, one of the largest ports in South America. That's Chinese investment. And Mexico, there's 4 different brands of electronic vehicles in Mexico already. So it's also important. So thanks for pointing that out, Timothy. And I guess the other advice I would give CEOs is trust your team. If you don't have a good team, now is the time to let some people go. Don't hesitate. These are the times where you actually gives you a quote unquote excuse to get rid of the people that you don't need. And so do that quickly. And that will not only bring more trust to the people that do stay, but that will make your company stronger. And if I may have a third one is I feel like this is not just a period that we're passing and we'll just get over it at some point. I think this is going to be the new status quo. So
Mm.
don't think of this as we thought about COVID, and we all were hoping for that vaccine. We're all hoping for the end of COVID. I don't think this is going to be like that in that regards. I think that changes variability and a very dynamic market are going to be the norm. So don't plan on just getting over this, because we might never be over this. This is probably going to be the new norm in many different ways.
Yeah, so you have to be bifocal right now. You got to be looking at both the short term and the
Correct.
long term,
And that will be the
and
that
be
will be the way
holding
that you
both
will have
and
to be going forward.
going
So
forward.
start planning and thinking like that.
Nada, you get the last word.
Yeah, thank you. No, thank you. Everything that has been said has been amazing. Obviously, competitive priorities, the business model strategy. But if I had to distill it down to one thing, and I've been talking about this, and remember, everybody, I'm an operations research quantitative person. Like Enrique, I am a mechanical engineer undergrad, so I'm technical. So for me to say this is a big deal. People. Do not forget about people. That is the one area that is going to
Yeah.
allow you as a company, everyone on your team, your customers, your suppliers, do not forget about people. That's going to involve culture, reskilling, retooling. This is absolutely essential because during times of change, your AI, access AI, it's a great tool, but it is not going to build relationships. And Enrique had mentioned that, this turbulence, it's maybe a new normal. One of the things I'm hearing from companies overseas is losing trust in companies in the US. But on an individual basis, what I'm watching is companies that are reaching out to suppliers and really cultivating that at this point in time. Again, back to people, that is overriding this, and that is going to be a very important thing moving forward. So remember the people.
So I really appreciate a couple of real things that hit me through this is, of course, it's about your people, even in the face of this. Now is the time to take advantage of both reestablishing your competitive advantage, but exploiting your competitive advantage against your competitors. And then I think that you both highlighted it. This is the new normal, working in uncertainty. We're going to have to learn to work in the rain. It's not going to stop raining anytime soon. So you better learn to work in the rain. And those that learn faster are going to have a tremendous competitive advantage. Thank you all very much for your time. Enrique, Nada, brilliant discussion, really insightful and thoughtful.
Thank you.
Appreciate that enormously.
Thank you.
And thank you everyone who joined us. And if you liked it, then please, when it comes out on the recording in a couple days, pass it on to the other 150 people that you know, because this is a really important message that I think the world needs now more than ever. Thank you all very much for helping make conscious capitalism relevant. Thanks. Be well, everybody.